Welcome in to the Newsmax Daily for Friday, May 23rd, 2025. Already shaping up to be a big news day, the fourth Friday of the month and the start of a busy Memorial Day weekend. If you are traveling this weekend, perhaps the worst weekend of the entire year to travel, be safe, be smart, and be patient. Coincidentally or not, today is also National Road Trip Day, initially established by the Flying J Travel Centers. It's also World Turtle Day, so there are a lot of events surrounding that, especially in the coastal communities. President Trump is scheduled to sign an executive order at the White House early this afternoon. According to Reuters and some other news wires, the order is going to be aimed at boosting the nuclear energy industry and cutting some of the regulations to help that happen. According to the White House, the president will not be speaking with reporters after the executive signing ceremony, as he usually does, allowing him to leave town early for a weekend full of events.
On Saturday morning, President Trump will deliver the commencement address at the United States Military Academy at West Point. On Monday, to commemorate Memorial Day, the president will visit Arlington National Cemetery and participate in a wreath-laying ceremony. The president will further honor our military next month on June 14th when he hosts the 250th anniversary of the United States Army with a grand military parade celebration right here in our nation's capital. President Trump will be joined by veterans, active duty troops, wounded warriors, Gold Star families, and patriotic Americans from across the country to celebrate our heroes who have kept us safe. Tickets for the parade and the celebration are available through the America 250 Commission's event registration portal. It will be a truly historic and special day for our country. After the parade, President Trump will travel to the G7 Leaders Summit in Canada from June 15th through the 17th. We will be sending additional logistics information out after the briefing. Last night, Republicans in the House passed the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, the most significant piece of legislation in years. There were a lot of good faith negotiations in the Republican conference leading up to the final passage, but as always, President Trump came in at the end to bring all sides together and get this deal done. This One Big Beautiful Bill will implement President Trump's Make America Great Again agenda by delivering the largest tax cut in American history for middle-class families, the working class, and small businesses. The One Big Beautiful Bill fulfills President Trump's promises of no tax on tips, which was applauded today by the CEO of Uber, no tax on overtime, a Made in America auto tax break, Trump savings accounts for newborn babies, and substantial tax cuts for our amazing seniors' Social Security benefits. The One Big Beautiful Bill will permanently secure the border by delivering the largest border security investment in history, funding at least 1 million annual removals of illegal aliens to carry out the largest deportation campaign ever, finishing the Trump border wall, and giving pay raises and bonuses for our incredible ICE and Border Patrol agents. The One Big Beautiful Bill protects the Medicaid program and its benefits for the most vulnerable Americans that the program was designed for, by kicking off 1.4 million illegal aliens from receiving benefits and implementing common-sense work requirements for able-bodied Americans. The One Big Beautiful Bill also helps get our fiscal house in order by carrying out the largest deficit reduction in nearly 30 years with $1.6 trillion in mandatory savings. Every single Democrat in the House of Representatives who voted against all of these common sense and massively popular policies. The Democrat Party has never been more radical and out of touch with the needs of the American people. The One Big Beautiful Bill is the final missing piece toward ushering the golden age of America. The Senate should pass this as quickly as possible.
White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt in the press briefing live on Newsmax. The success of the Trump administration now lies in the hands of the Senate. And Newsmax spoke with several senators about getting the bill passed. Let's start with Kansas Senator Roger Marshall on Wake Up America.
Kansas Senator, member of the Budget Committee. Roger Marshall, great to see you this morning, Senator. So you've said in the past it's time to pass the president's agenda to lower taxes. And while a huge victory for the president today, what hurdles does this bill hit in the Senate?
Well, first of all, just a big congratulations to Speaker Mike Johnson, to the House, to President Trump. I've been saying all along that he's the best closer in the game, and he did another great job getting the deal closed over there. When I think about the House and the Senate, I would look at it like this. The House would be like a cup of coffee. It's clear to the top, just steaming over. But the Senate is the saucer underneath that coffee cup. The Senate is the saucer. So now we need to go back through that bill with a fine-tooth comb and make it better. I think there's opportunities in Medicaid to make that bill better, to make sure that we strengthen it, that we preserve it for those who need it most. We want to make sure that those senior citizens that are in nursing homes are taken care of, and that they would never be jeopardized, that their Medicaid would never be jeopardized. People with disabilities, we want to make sure that they would never be jeopardized as well. Children, we want to make sure that they have Medicaid, those that need it as well. So we need to take this bill, we need to make it better, and probably the one thing I would just add here is the number one concern that most of us have up here long term is the national debt. So we think that there's an opportunity in this bill that we can do a little bit better job addressing the national debt.
Yeah, Senator, when you look to see how close this thing was and the hurdles that it faced getting through the House of Representatives, passing with only a 1-vote margin, do you worry at all that any changes the Senate makes might unravel that carefully crafted coalition that got this thing through the House?
Well, look, I think that is absolutely part of the equation, and that was certainly the plea from Speaker Johnson when he came over and visited us on Wednesday. I get that. But I think that we have an obligation to take their bill and to make it better. And I just don't know how these people that have voted for it now could vote against it if we make some minor tweaks to it as well. I just don't think that they want to see a tax hike go on to any Americans. Look, this bill is going to save the average family $7,000, $8,000 in a year very easily. It may be well over $1,000 a month the average American family is going to save. And then if on the back end of that we can address the national debt, I still think that we'll get their vote.
That's Kansas Senator Roger Marshall on Wake Up America. So he said address the national debt 3 times in 2 minutes and 27 seconds. The bill calls for raising the debt ceiling, and we already know Rand Paul is one Republican senator that is a no-go. He also said a few times that we, being the Senate, have to make the bill better. So take from that what you will. This is South Dakota Senator Mike Rounds on National Report with Emma Reckenberg and Sean Kreisman.
Senator, Speaker Mike Johnson and other GOP lawmakers have stated that they have been working with the Senate or speaking with other senators along the way because they knew this would be a long haul. It's 1,100 pages, 1,100-page bill that they knew this would make it to the upper chamber. So they went and made provisions there essentially to make contact with the Senate. Can you confirm any of that? Have you spoken with anyone in the lower chamber about this bill in order to get this passed by July 4th?
The Speaker was actually at one of our lunches this week, and our leadership teams have been in contact. Chairmen of the different committees have been in contact with one another. We know where the challenges are at. We know what's got to be corrected or modified in order to pass through the Senate, and we'll do it in such a fashion that we believe the House will be able to come back and accept any modifications along that line. The most important part of this, Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, will be permanently extended. That's critical. And once again, get that debt ceiling extended far enough down to where the president can work on the other major issues.
Yeah. Speaking of taxes, that was a huge campaign issue that President Trump ran on. He wants to eliminate a lot of them. No taxes on tips, no tax on overtime pay, and also the idea of no tax on Social Security. How do you view those proposals, sir? Would you be in favor of including those in the bill?
It depends on whether or not we can pay for them. And I think one of the items that we found out the other day by unanimous consent was the movement of no tax on tips. And that can go through the Senate separately if we need to have it go through separately as a separate provision. It went through on a unanimous consent calendar. So there's ways to skin this thing to take care of a lot of the promises that the president's making to take care of those that are most in need and most need to have a bump in their income. So more than willing to work on all of it. And a number of those provisions may very well be included. But once again, it depends on where the dollars are at so that we don't continue to add to the deficit, which a lot of people, Republicans in both the House and the Senate, have concerns about.
A major victory there for Republicans in the House, and particularly there for President Trump, who's been intimately involved in this. So now advancing to the Senate, and we appreciate the time of Senator Mike Round. Senator, thank you very much. Enjoy your holiday weekend, sir.
Newsmax's Sean Kreisman with South Dakota Senator Mike Rounds. Again, concerns on the debt, and he's in favor of no tax on tips and overtime as long as they can find a way to pay for it. It is going to be a very interesting next couple of weeks. All right, let's go back to the White House press briefing where the second question of the day was exactly what I predicted yesterday.
And on the Qatari aircraft, the Air Force has said they're going to classify all the information about the work that has to get done to bring it up to snuff to be Air Force One. Previous Air Force One contracts, including the one that the president entered into in 2018, are public. That's available knowledge. Will the White House commit to releasing who's doing that work and the cost of that work? I understand that some elements might be classified about specific systems, but will you commit to releasing that basic information so people can see ultimately what this costs?
Well, Garrett, as you know, that's a question for the Department of Defense and the United States Air Force, who is accepting this jet as part of their fleet.
Declassify anything he wants.
Well, you'll have to ask the Department of Defense and the United States Air Force, who is accepting this jet as part of its fleet.
The question about the Qatari jet was from an NBC reporter, but it was Garrett Haake and not Peter Alexander, who was roasted by President Trump the previous day for asking about the jet. If you didn't catch yesterday's Newsmax Daily, go back and listen. That's why you have to listen every day. Karoline also offered this statement on the deadly shooting of the Israeli embassy staffers, the two staffers killed in D.C.
President Trump is saddened and outraged over the brutal murder of two Israeli embassy staff here in Washington, D.C. last night. Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram were a beautiful young couple. In fact, we learned that Yaron was planning to propose to Sarah next week in Jerusalem. Yaron's father, Daniel, spoke about the young couple's devotion for one another this morning. He said, "They were in love, one for the other. The embassy told us they were like a star couple at the embassy. I never expected something like this. He had his whole life before him." These words, especially every parent knows, are heart-wrenching. The evil of anti-Semitism must be eradicated from our society. I spoke to the Attorney General this morning. The Department of Justice will be prosecuting the perpetrator responsible for this to the fullest extent of the law. Hatred has no place in the United States of America under President Donald Trump. Everyone here at the White House is praying for the victims' friends and families during this unimaginable time.
And for more, U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, on Newsmax.
Joining us now, U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee. Ambassador, thanks for coming on today. Horrible circumstances. We'll just start with, your thoughts here on all this.
I got a call early this morning, Jerusalem time, from Pam Bondi. She was at the scene of the murders. She briefed me on what was going on and wanted, of course, to get word to the prime minister, to the foreign minister, to the president of Israel, to key people here. It's just been a horrible day throughout the country. People are devastated by the news that this young couple with their whole lives in front of them, planning to come to Israel next week to formalize their engagement, are gunned down in cold blood by an anti-Semitic, Jew-hating, crazy person, probably fueled by this contagious anti-Semitism that is going across our country and across the world. It's heartbreaking. And as it turned out, the young man, I talked to his father this morning, and his father works for one of my closest friends here in Israel. And I wasn't even aware of that until the time that we were able to visit. But this is just a tragedy that's shaken this country. I think it should shake everybody in the United States as well. This is the result of the kind of inflamed and idiotic and uneducated rhetoric that people are out there screaming in the streets and on college campuses.
Ambassador, it's terrible to say, but as to your point, we've been seeing this happening and getting worse and worse, this anti-Semitism and also this violence for years now. And I think one of the very sad things about all this, besides the loss of these two young people, is also that this is not as surprising as it should be. This is something that has almost become a norm when we see this much hatred throughout the world, and particularly in the United States. How can we start to go back the other way?
Start being human beings, start acting with a level of civility toward each other, get information that is accurate. When people are out there saying from the river to the sea, they're demonstrating their ignorance. When they scream things like queers for Palestine, it's obvious that they're idiots, that they're uninformed idiots to say such things. But I think it's also important to push back strongly and to stand up for the Jewish people across the world and to say they've been through a Holocaust. They were chased over the world for 2,000 years. And we're not going to let that happen again. I hope all of my fellow Christians will join me in being loud voices to say no more, never again. We said that after the Holocaust. It's time to say it again, but a lot louder, and mean it a lot more, and stand with our Jewish friends as never before and let them know they're not going to go through this alone, and we're going through it with them. But we're also going to demand that strict punishment goes to those who commit acts of violence against innocent people who committed no crime. Their only fault is they love God and they're Jewish. And that's not a sin, and that's not a crime.
Powerful words from Mike Huckabee, now the U.S. ambassador to Israel, speaking with Katrina Zish and Bob Brooks on Newsmax from Jerusalem. If you missed Greg Kelly last night, you missed a great conversation between Greg and Newsmax chief Washington correspondent James Rosen.
So that was an amazing moment in January 2022 when our correspondent James Rosen asked President Biden directly about his cognitive condition. Americans were concerned, had doubts. There was a poll, and James Rosen stood up and made history at potentially tremendous personal, maybe even professional cost. But it was a question for the ages, and James Rosen joins us now. His question, that chapter is actually covered in the new Jake Tapper book. James, once again, for probably the 1,000th time, congratulations, and we thank you for that incredible moment. How do you feel right now amid all of this renewed, I don't know, or introspection that the media seems to be doing, and a lot of finger pointing too?
Well, at the risk of sounding like one of those athletes who's just hit the end zone and starts speaking in biblical terms, I'm very grateful, Greg. I'm grateful to God for having all my arms and legs and lungs, and I'm grateful for being able to work, and I'm grateful for great friends like you. And you have been tireless in bringing attention to that moment and the importance of it, and I deeply appreciate that. And you were doing so at a time when very few others were. I'm proud of my work on that moment. I asked the question respectfully. I said to the president, I don't know if we're going to play the clip, but I said that I wanted to ask the question that was somewhat delicate, and to do so with utmost respect for his lifetime of accomplishment and the high office that he holds. I paid a high price for it. I was blackballed in the White House in the form of the press operation in the person of Jen Psaki and her successor, Karine Jean-Pierre. I was not allowed to ask any questions in the White House press briefing room or in other settings such as background briefings or telephone briefings and so forth for 8 months. These are the boxes you usually have to check in order to get called on in White House press briefings in those types of settings. You need to have a seat in the briefing room, which Newsmax does. You need to, generally speaking, to be a member of the White House Correspondents Association, which I have been more or less in good standing for about 26 years. You need to show up every day, which I was. And you need to be respectful, which I was. But nonetheless, in response to that question that I asked the president about his cognitive fitness and the growing public concerns over it that early, January 2022, I was blackballed for 8 months, and that wasn't even the longest of those periods. I was also blackballed for the final 14 months of the Biden administration.
All right, let me hold it up a minute right there. Again, that's Newsmax chief Washington correspondent James Rosen, a veteran, to say the least, of the White House press corps. Blackballed, as he put it, by the Biden administration. Disbarred, if you will, from asking any questions at White House press briefings for months. And you didn't hear anything about that in the media back in 2022, did you? All the mainstream networks, all the big mainstream political news websites were freaking out when President Trump took the unprecedented step of not allowing the AP in the press briefing. But you didn't hear about Newsmax's reporter not being allowed to ask a question for, what did he say, 18 months. Did you? All right, back to Greg and James.
Well, James, we are going to play the question in its entirety, and I think as impressive as the substance, the thrust of the question, it's also how you handle the moment. Your respect, your appropriate deference to the President of the United States, and watching his lack of respect is really something as well. Let's take a look at that moment that, again, made history, and it's really a beautiful thing to behold. Let's take a look.
Thank you very much for this honor. James Rosen with Newsmax. I'd like to raise a delicate subject, but with utmost respect for your life accomplishments and the high office you hold. A poll released this morning by Politico Morning Consult found 49% of registered voters disagreeing with the statement, Joe Biden is mentally fit. Not even a majority of Democrats who responded strongly affirmed that statement.
Well, I'll let you all make the judgment whether they're correct.
Well, so the question I have for you, sir, if you'd let me finish, is why do you suppose such large segments of the American electorate have come to harbor such profound concerns about your cognitive fitness? Thank you.
I have no idea.
Remarkable, James, in every respect. How you asked that question, that you asked the question, and his flippant response. Number one, what was your initial reaction once you heard that and you sat down? What were you thinking? You weren't satisfied with that answer, I'm sure.
I was, in fact, because it was all the public needed to see. I always knew that he wasn't going to spend a whole lot of time on the enemy territory of public concerns about his cognitive fitness. A nimbler respondent, someone like Barack Obama, could have made sport with me and left me as roadkill by saying something to the effect, because you've got BS outlets like yours pumping out BS, right? And I'd be dead. There would be no opportunity for responding. Instead, we heard the President of the United States say, I have no idea. And that was the entirety of his answer. And to many eyes, that answer validated the question, because when a man tells you, I have no idea, he is, in a sense, speaking to a mind that is empty.
Wow, how about that? Well, we know from the new book, and I have, I don't like this book. We kind of knew it anyway. We knew it intuitively that the staff freaked out behind the scenes. Let me ask you this, though. What about the social media? There was a bit of a social media onslaught and a mainstream media onslaught that you had to endure for asking a question that everybody, look, I know you went through, we know what it's like to be cyberbullied, some do, if you want to talk about that, but I'm also interested in this bigger question. What did it say about everything that you were punished for asking a totally valid question, not just by the White House, but by society? That shows a society in serious trouble, in my opinion.
Well, I suppose a segment of society, which is to say the hoi polloi of the intelligentsia here in Washington. And I was made to feel rude and fringy for asking that question by my colleagues in the White House press corps. And as I mentioned, I was blackballed by the White House itself for about 8 months. And as we saw, nobody followed up. Nobody asked the president again about his cognitive fitness or about the concerns surrounding it for about another 2.5 years, at least until after he announced for re-election. And by the time President Biden withdrew from the 2024 campaign in July of 2024, it was clear that this once fringe, rude question that I had posed really cut to the heart of the defining issue of the Biden presidency. And we are not done by any means with the disclosure, the public disclosure on this story. Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson are colleagues of mine. I've known them both for some time. I've known Jake for about 25 years. I have respect for both of them. But we will see more books come out. We will see memoirs from various White House officials come out where, for money, they will retell their stories of what they knew about Joe Biden's decline and when. And then the greatest prize of all, and it'll take a lot longer, is we will have archival disclosure. We will finally, at some point, get our hands on the White House memos and emails and texts from the Biden administration. And those will give us an insight into the mechanics of how this extraordinary edifice of deception and misdirection was constructed and how it worked on a day-to-day basis, and perhaps an answer to the question of who was really running the country.
Did you hear that, folks? An extraordinary edifice of deception. James Rosen speaks better than most people can write on their very best day. It's pretty amazing. Now, we respectfully may have certain differences with certain journalists in Washington, D.C., Jay Tapper and the rest, but I hear he's a nice guy in real life, and that's fine. But, James, you are a nice guy in real life and a fantastic journalist.
Greg Kelly, host of Greg Kelly Reports, 9 p.m. Eastern, and Chief Washington Correspondent James Rosen, who I haven't known for that long, but I can attest to what Greg said. James is a terrific person, number one, and a fantastic journalist. If you are one of the many new Newsmax viewers, you will see James Rosen reporting from Washington on various shows throughout the course of the day, certainly when there's breaking news out of D.C. as well. President Trump, for some reason, came out this morning and threatened new tariffs on the EU and on Apple. Well, I know the reason. Number one, because the EU hasn't come to the table to negotiate, as so many others have. So Trump is doing what Trump does, right? He's also threatening Apple because he wants them to make more iPhones in the United States than overseas. But Wall Street didn't necessarily like it. The stock market opened deep in the red, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average off 500 points, the NASDAQ off more than 300, the S&P 500 sharply lower as well. Heading into the weekend, I don't want to predict what's going to happen for the rest of the day, but it will likely close out a negative week, and on Monday the markets are closed for the holiday. Uranium and nuclear-related stocks were trading higher prior to the market opening based on the president's expected executive order today to help jumpstart the industry. Then the president will be leaving Washington, D.C., as we heard from Karoline Leavitt earlier, a big weekend of events for the president. And then he'll be at his New Jersey golf course, where he'll probably spend most weekends for the rest of the summer due to the heat in Palm Beach. Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies were also lower this morning after hitting a new all-time high of more than $111,000 yesterday. Bitcoin, at the time of this recording, is now down to 108,700 and change. XRP down 7 cents to $2.35. It's already a busy news day and going to get busier, and a busy weekend of events as well. You can keep up with all of the news today and throughout the holiday weekend on Newsmax N2 and at Newsmax.com, beginning with Wake Up America Weekend Edition, Saturday and Sunday, Saturday Report, Saturday and Sunday Agenda, and don't miss the Newsmax Memorial Day Weekend Troopathon. That's happening tomorrow morning at 11 Eastern. Then Michael Savage and Rob Carson on Sunday night, Wendy Bell's Common Sense, Ambassador Nancy Brinker, documentaries, and much more. I'm Tony Marino. Have a fantastic weekend, and whatever you may be doing this weekend, traveling or not, let's not forget what Memorial Day is all about. And keep on fighting the good fight.
News breaks every minute, every day. You need the app, the Newsmax app. Find it free on your smartphone store. Then watch us anytime, anywhere.
Information. Truth. Is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.